Welcome to this episode of the DJ Interview with your host, Harry the Big Dog.
Yeah, that's me. Harry the Big Dog. What's up, everybody? I am chilling. I am Harry the Big Dog. This is the DJ Interview. We're going to get this thing going. We got this producer. First of all, this is part of our producer series, this DJ interview right here. Once a month, I'm bringing on a producer because they actually make the songs that us DJs, I'm saying us now because I feel I'm still a DJ, us DJs play. So today, our special guest on the DJ Interview Producer Series, we have Jay the Pro. What's going on, Jay?
Man, how you?
I'm good. I am excellent as always. Well, it's raining out here in my neck of the wood, and I think it's making up for all the rain that we didn't get
right
throughout the summer.
I got one.
All in one day.
Yeah, it's been a while in the summer. Absolutely.
Oh man, so for everybody who is watching, Jay the Pro, he is a producer. He's produced songs. Well, you know what? Just let him tell this thing.
Okay.
Jay, if tell the people your government name if you want, and how you got this name, Jay the Pro.
Well, our government name is Jason Lee.
Okay.
Right. I guess coming up, I had different names. When I was an MC, I had different names, JL Rock, that kind of thing, old school names, stuff like that. A friend of mine named Paul, he actually dubbed me Jay the Professional. Right, and they shortened it the Pro. He actually said it in a rhyme, and from then on, everybody started calling me Jay the Pro. So that's how the name came about.
That's how that name came about. Wow. So real quickly, just name a few people that the audience may know that you've worked with.
Okay. I've worked with Onyx.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with Sons of Man, Royal Fam, the Brooklyn Camp of Woo.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with Jason Weaver.
Roger that.
A group called Missing Links that was Sound Aloud. It was Al Tariq that used to rhyme with the B-Nuts. He was on a lot of their records. And two other cats named Problems and Black Attack. They had a group Sound Aloud called Missing Links. I've worked with Kalina from Dirty Money, Stack Bundles. I've worked with let's see.
It's like a million of them.
Yeah. Recently,
right?
Recently I've worked like newer artists. I've worked with Lil Bands. He's a young artist. He's on Republic under Universal Records.
Okay.
I've worked with another artist called Q9. He's with the Hitmaker Music Group. Stuff like that. I've been around doing it for a while.
So when did you actually start producing? Was it yesterday? Was it over the weekend?
Pretty much, yeah. Nah, I guess how it started for me, you know, I played drums coming up.
Oh,
I
wow.
was into that. I was always into hip hop. You know, my background is Trinidadian, so I was influenced by a lot of different music. My father played in a band. He actually played bass. So they, you know, practicing in a basement kind of thing. And
Wow.
that's where they discovered I had rhythm. Basically. I mean, story went, I was about 2 years old and the band was taking a break from practicing. So they came up to get something to eat. And all of a sudden they heard somebody knocking the drums on time. So they looked around, thinking it was a drummer downstairs though. And went downstairs and seen me, little with sticks in my hand, hitting the thing on time. And it was like, oh, this kid got rhythm. So that's how it started. Coming up, I guess the first thing you could say that I started making beats on was really pause tapes.
Right? Like all of us.
Yeah, looping pause tapes. I know you know about that.
Oh yeah.
Performing. And then I had one Christmas I got something called a Synsonic drum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I learned to program that. So that was basically like the first beat started. Then like the Elisa drum machine, that kind of thing. I had a little echo machine that had maybe like a second's worth of sample. So I learned to loop it like that and play the drums on it.
Right.
You know, the drum machine behind it. So that's kind of how it started. I DJ'd a little bit too. I ain't in your caliber, but you know, that's kind of where it started at.
I don't think nobody's in my caliber.
There you go. You know.
Let me stop that. So, what year are we talking when you started drumming?
I was 2, so this was the 70s, basically.
Okay.
Mid 70s, about 74. I played, you know, drums in school, high school band, that kind of thing. You know, toured with the band, like, you know, we go on school trips, that kind of thing.
Right.
And I played percussion. Then I sort of ventured off into steel pan as well, playing with steel band, different steel bands and stuff like that. So, you know, I was the Trinidadian influence. Okay. But it was always music in the household. So I was influenced by all genres kind of thing. I was that kid walking around listening to weird stuff when everybody else was listening to what the norm was. You know what I mean?
Where are you originally from? I know what area you're in now, but where are you originally from?
Well, I was actually born in Canada because my parents were going to school out there.
Okay.
All right. I left when I was 2 and moved to Trinidad. And when I was 6, I moved to New York.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So you spent most of your life in New York?
Yeah, between New York and Trinidad. I was back and forth a lot.
Okay.
I spent a little time in Toronto as well. I did my last year of high school in Toronto. And then moved back to New York a few years later. So I got to see more of the world in just like a 10-block radius, basically.
For real.
It also had an influence on me musically.
Now the music in Trinidad, the music in Canada, how different was it from the music in the States?
Well, of course, Trinidad, you know, that's where Calypso came from, as well as Japan. So, you know, it was a lot of soul. They played reggae, they played soul, they played everything in Trinidad. So the musically, we heard everything, you know, kind of thing. When I moved to Canada, they were heavy into hip hop when I went there. So there was artists like Maestro Fresh West,
right?
You know, there was artists like Dream Warriors, that kind of thing. So it was heavily influenced by hip hop. So it wasn't really that different. Everything that you heard in the States was being played up there. The only difference is it wasn't on mainstream radio. In order to hear it, you had to hear it on college radio, kind of thing. But it was big hip hop movement when I went up there.
Okay.
So musically, it was, you know, pretty much the same thing. They listened mainly East Coast, but you know, it was influence from West Coast when they started making noise, that kind of thing.
Right. So did they in Trinidad, were they playing, you know, the old school Jamaican artists, Yellow Man and Sister?
Yeah, they were playing all of that when I was little, yeah. But they played hip hop and everything too. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So, yeah.
Dope. So
it was a mosh pot to everything basically.
Oh, sweet. So now, let's turn this thing around a little and dig into what a producer actually does. Is
Okay.
do you kind of I mean, I don't know. I'm just going off the top of the head. Do you have a piece of music in mind? Do you have to get the lyrics from the artist to think of a piece of music? Do you
Well,
explain the start of it?
I think the discrepancy really is the difference between a beat maker and a producer.
Okay.
Right? There's a difference between making a beat and actually producing a record. Right?
Okay,
Producing a
explain
record.
that for
Okay,
everybody who don't know.
so making a beat, that's basically coming up with the pattern, the melody, that kind of thing, depending on what you're using to create, basically. Producing entails incorporating the artist, getting the best out of them lyrically, melodically, depending on whether they're singing, they rapping, that kind of thing, and actually putting together a piece of music that becomes a what's the word I'm looking for? It becomes an actual song, like you hear,
Right.
you know what I mean? So you listen to what they're doing, you basically help them with their articulation, you help them with the melodies kind of thing, and you piece the music around it so that it becomes unison kind of thing.
Right.
There's more to it. It's not just there's beat makers and there's producers. Producers actually know how to make a record.
Okay, and beat makers, they kind of make a beat and maybe sell it to somebody or hand it off.
Right.
It's part of a team.
Right. A beat maker can make a beat and hand it off, but they're not necessarily producing a record. They produce
Right.
the beat, which is technically what it is, but they're not actually putting the record together, putting the work together. Right. Now they are beat makers that do produce, songs as well. Many.
Right.
Right. So it depends on, how you want to label it kind of thing.
So are you both a producer and a beat maker?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Nice.
So
So go ahead.
starting off, sometimes you'll have an idea in your head to make the beat. Like you have a melody in your head and you got to put it down kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you start off with a melody and you start forming the drums around it, the bass or whatever. Sometimes it'll go totally left from what you started off with and become something totally different. It's weird that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But once that's formed, you might have an artist that hears something, or you might have an idea song-wise as which way it's supposed to go, and you can direct the artist as to how to piece it together.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it works like that.
So now did being a drummer help you with this process? Because now you know how to, at least drum beats. You could
Yes.
turn that into a drum machine, whether it's
Yes.
a Roland or the Lens drums or whatever it was back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. It did help, percussively, rhythms, patterns. So, it's not hard for me to make any type of genre.
Mhm.
But, doing music in school, I actually learned to read music. Right. So I understood what bars were,
Right.
what notes were, clefs, that kind of thing. So it helped me production wise.
Okay. So help us explain what some of these terms co-producer, executive producer, mastering, you know, what is all of that stuff? I'm not a
Okay.
producer. I play
Right.
what you guys create.
I got you. Co-producer just means that you basically produce the record with someone else, right?
Mhm.
Another producer. So they get co-production credit on the record. An executive producer, it entails, I guess, two things. They usually oversee the project budget-wise as to the way it goes, overseeing the project as to what's needed, studio time, that kind of thing, as well as the creative side as well, making sure that the overall project sounds unison, sounds like an actual work of art kind of thing.
Right.
It can be interpreted two different ways. But usually executive producers have a lot to do with the budgeting behind it, the direction it goes, what's needed, studio wise, that kind of thing. As for what was the other thing? Mastering? Big Dog, you there? Hello? I think we lost him.
You hearing me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. You back.
Oh, okay. I don't know how I got lost. But the mastering thing, what does that mean? And does every record, or should every record, I'm dating myself, song be mastered, and are they actually mastered?
They should be mastered. A lot of songs now, some of them aren't, because there's so many people that's able to put music out from their home, their laptop, whatever they're using at home. So sometimes they don't get it mastered. The record might pop off, kind of thing. But mastering is basically getting the levels to industry standard. So it'd be at a listenable level, or an industry standard level, depending on what media form you play it on, whether it be CD, which is not really used that much anymore, MP3, broadcast level, radio level, that kind of thing. Right. So basically, when you make a record or you mix a record, you would leave a little bit of headroom, which means is you're not having it hitting all the way up on the meter to red. You actually leave a certain space so that a mastering engineer can actually EQ it and compress it and bring the level up to industry standard. I think he's gone again. Oh, there you go.
Your industry standard is what? Radio, whatever media it's on.
Yes.
Does it have to have a certain level, whether it's a record or a 45 back in the day?
Yep.
A CD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh.
So they, sometimes there's certain songs are mastered for more than one media form, but usually if it's mastered correctly, it fits, all the media forms, whether it be for YouTube, MP3 streaming, CDs, vinyl back in the days, cassettes, 8-tracks. It didn't matter. It was brought up to a certain level so that clarity was there and it was at an industry standard level.
Wow, you took it back 8-tracks.
Yeah.
I still got my 8-tracks.
All the young ones out there what an 8-track is.
Yeah. The old school people know.
Exactly.
And all the cassettes.
Oh yeah, I still got a bunch of them.
I got a bunch of them. My cassette game is pretty dope. I have to say.
I believe it. Oh, your Barry Horowitz stuff right there.
So, the producing nowadays versus back in the day, what do you think the difference is? What do you see that's obviously it's the analog and digital, but the way people produced back then, what's different from your 70s, 80s, 90s to your 2010s, 2020s?
Well, if we start with the 70s and 80s, basically it was more instrumentation, more live instrumentation.
Okay.
Right. So actually producing a record entailed using real musicians. It sort of transitioned later on with like maybe new wave music where they use a lot of synthesizers and like the first drum machines, that kind of thing. Nowadays, everything is easy. I'm back in the late 80s, 90s when we were doing it. We were using SP1200s,
right?
And Roland's and that kind of thing, which had like minimal
MPCs, the MPC 60,
MPC 60s, Roger, that kind of thing, which had limited sample time.
Right.
And when you were in hip hop, you were digging through the crates for samples, kind of thing. You were going through records. You would learn the records. You would look at records and see certain instrumentalists on a record And just by looking at that, you might not know what it is, but you can see that this person played drums on it, who played drums on this other record. So you knew it was going to sound a certain way. It would be, the drummer would be kind of funky. The bass line would sound like this, because a lot of, studio musicians, they played for different artists and different kind of thing. So it was a lot harder piecing stuff together. You had to actually go in there and chop the samples up, learn to truncate, which means cutting off the extra piece. With the SP, you only had a certain amount of sample time, so you would have to play the record on 45. It was 33 and a third RPM. You play it on 45 or even faster, so you can get the actual length of the sample, and then slow it down and chop it up and make it into what and create it how you want to create it, kind of thing. Now, the way that these systems are set up, or doors are set up, or whatever you're using, whether it be the newer MPCs, or even like the DAW programs like FL Studios, which was Fruity Loops, or Logic Pro, or Reasons, or whatever. They actually have devices that can capture the sample and look for the transients. Transients are basically the strikes in the song, like when say kick drum hits or snare,
or snare,
right? And it can look for those transients and actually chop it depending on what timing you want, whether it be 4/4 time or 8th notes or 16th notes, and actually chop the sample up for you. So you can actually, once you run it in there, it does that, and you can play the pieces the way you want to play it. We didn't have that back in the day. Not at all. You had to do it yourself, kind of thing. Look for that start point. Whatever machine you was using, you was turning that dial, looking for the start of that sample, striking hit right on that kick, that kind of thing. Beat makers now, they have it real easy because there's ready-made loops.
Yep.
You can go online and you can pull thousands of loops and just start creating off of those loops. They have hi-hat patterns already set. They have drum patterns, 808 patterns already set. So they just basically drag and drop.
Right.
So it's a lot easier now. That's why it's so saturated. You know what I'm saying? But it depends on where you are musically and creatively as to what you do with that. You know what I mean? So it's a big difference. It's a lot easier now to start producing as it was back then.
Wow. So sampling nowadays, let's go on that, because you talked about it just a second ago. Sampling nowadays, do people still do it? Since most of these people, they got lawyers listening for every little piece that they think may be your thing. Yeah.
I mean, there's still a lot of samples used. The way these days is really used more so with loops, with like a lot of the younger artists. They might loop, something from the 90s or the 2000s or even earlier, right? But they do use a lot of samples, but obviously you got to get clearance to whoever runs everything on it. Otherwise, you get a cease and desist letter and nothing happening after that. You know what I mean?
You could be
a lot of sampling.
You had a hottest record that you're not able to play, right?
Exactly.
So let's go back to that 70s era. You telling me Earth, Wind and Fire, who has like 1 million people in the band, your Casey and the Sunshine bands, they recorded each instrument, or everything was mic'd up and they actually played live.
Yes. I mean, early on, like if you go back to the 60s, they were recording on 4 tracks. Right.
Wow.
So they didn't have all the tracks that came about later on, like 24 tracks and 48 tracks and all of that. So they basically had to practice the record, performing the record, and then do, a live take of it. They might be able to add something later on.
Right.
Like, maybe a guitar solo, that kind of thing. As time went on, they were able to record in sections, but you had to know how to mic, certain sections so that you didn't get feedback from that mic. You wouldn't get bleeding from, say, the drummer. They would be, a screen protector around the drum set within the recording studio when they were mic'd up, so that they weren't bleeding onto the horn section or the vocalist or whatever. But it was all live instrumentation.
Wow.
And that's why you kind of feel the energy from those live records sometimes more so than you do now with these newer produced records. You can hear the exact synchronicity with the metronome because of these records. Like back then, say for instance, like a bass player, he might have had a bad day, right? So when he came into the studio, he was angry. You know what I mean? He had stuff on his mind. So when he's playing, he might be pounding that thing. You feel that energy. Then you might have a drummer. He had a good day. He's laid back. So he's in his groove. So he's in his pocket. He's just there. And you feel his energy. You know what I mean? A guitar player, he might be on something else. So just from, even though they're playing something, the way they played it came through in the music.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's different now where you actually sample. Obviously, the samples, if you're using a sample of something, you got that energy from that sample.
Yeah.
When you put around it, unless you know how to manipulate it right, it's going to sound, just dead on that metronome, that click kind of thing.
Right.
If you know what you're doing, you can move it around and actually try to give it a live feel. But that all comes with, practice and
experience
and doing it repetitively. Practice. You know what I mean?
So this is a question you don't have to answer. Do the old school producers hate on the new ones?
Some do. Some do. Yeah, I mean, that's been an ongoing theme. I know when you was younger, I'm sure your parents was like, "What are you listening to? What is that you're listening to?"
Yeah.
Right. And now a lot of the older producers, they listen to what these kids are doing now, and everything sounds like the same thing.
Right.
Back then, even with the MCs or the producers, you would be able to listen to a producer and be able to tell, okay, that's Pete Rock, or that's Premier,
right,
or that's Large Professor, or that's Q-Tip, that's Diamond D. You can tell by their production who they were. Unless you're up on what's happening now, a lot of these beats sound the same.
Right.
But it's up to you whether you're doing it if you're older to try to keep up, not be a dinosaur on this. Listen to what the youth are doing. You know what I mean? And incorporate what they're doing, what you're doing, because that works to my benefit. Since I'm older, I have that knowledge. I walk in the studio, they see me, they know I'm older, they think I'm gonna come with some boom bap, and then I play what they rock through, and they like, "Oh, gee, that's you." Yeah, it's nothing to me. It's all rhythm, it's all patterns, because I understand what y'all bounce is. I understand the feel y'all looking for. So I'm able to incorporate it that way. But because of my knowledge of music, I'm also able to add the older element into it, which becomes generational. So it's not necessarily the microwave music that some of these younger producers are doing now. You know what I mean? Not all of them, because there's some real talented young producers.
Yeah.
There's some cats out there that are young, but they're real hip, and they're musical as well. But if you get in your mode being older, like, I can't listen to that, it all sounds the same, you'll be back in prehistoric days.
Mm-hmm.
You have to find something within the music that you like and build off of that. And in the newer music kind of thing.
They'll be there with me. I don't think I listen to anything past 2001.
I got you. Yeah, but
I'm strictly old school and disco.
I got you. I gotta stay relevant because I'm still doing it. So
because you're still doing it.
Yeah.
Now, some of the artists that you're working with, because one of the other complaints I hear is the what they call the mumble rap.
Yeah.
The artists you guys are working with, do they have that style of rap, or do they have more of a New York style of old MCing?
Well, some do and some don't. I worked with everything from the mumble rappers to actual lyricists.
Right.
So singers to, dancehall artists, soca artists, Afrobeat artists, that kind of thing. So it all depends on what you're working with. Back then, I would say back in the 90s and the 2000s, when you were MC, unless you were somebody like Jay or Big who write the rhyme in their head and go spit it, but we feel lyrical. A lot of what they do now, a lot of these younger artists, they do punch rap. A lot of younger hip hop artists, so they'll just go in the booth and freestyle. But because you're able to, as opposed to like in the 70s and the 80s where you had to do mostly one take, they're able to vibe, come up with a line, bring it back, vibe to it. Okay, I got something. And record it line by line. Even so with R&B, like I've done R&B records working with different artists, and they'll go line by line and piece it together. And when you're done, it becomes like one full verse or one full record, a bridge, that kind of thing. But we're going line by line and vibing. You might think of a line, you're like, yeah, you know what? We could come up with something better than that. We're trying to stay relevant on topic of what the song is.
Right.
So we'll go back and be like, okay, yeah, that'll work. Or sometimes something they say might spark an idea. So it might not necessarily be what we're going to use, but it sparks another idea when you're producing a record, and we come up with the line that way. You know, if you're helping to write.
Right.
I see my man Jason Hart said he can't get a mumble rap.
I get it. Can't get with
I know. But with them, I had to learn basically. With them, it's more about a vibe than it is about the lyrics. With the mumble rappers kind of thing, it's more about the energy of the song and the vibe that they give.
Explain that, because I still don't get it.
I mean. Well, with them, they're not so concerned. Well, it depends on the artist, because there's a lot of different genres in hip hop now.
Right.
If you think of a Kendrick Lamar, he's a newer artist, even though he's been around for a while, right? Or like a J.I.D., they're lyrical, right? Yeah. So you're going to pick up on what they're saying, and they actually have thought into what they're doing. A lot of these mumble rappers, or some of the newer rappers, they're just going off that vibe. They're looking for, once that beat gives them a certain feeling, they're just going to say things maybe melodically that just is what they're feeling at the time, or what the people in their age group or their demographic can relate to, and they're just going to put that on a record. But it's about the feeling that it gives them more so than the lyrical content.
I'm understanding now.
Right. So that's why a lot of the records, it might sound monotonous to you, or it sounds like they absolutely saying nothing, but that's not necessarily what it's about for them. And sometimes they're saying stuff that you might not understand, but they pick up on it, like we picked up on certain things back then. We had lingo, certain artists, they would have their own, like, say for instance, Ghostface, Raekwon. They were saying all types of off-the-wall stuff in his lyrics, right? And we would understand what they on. Sometimes we wouldn't understand what they was on.
About 70% of it, I did understand.
Right. But to somebody older, like, yo, this is nonsense. What are you talking about? It's sort of the same thing. As time goes on, things change. You got to understand, as opposed to necessarily just shunning it all away. Sometimes you just got to listen, ask questions, and learn from them as to what their vibe is, what they vibe off of.
Right. Right. So could you say we were spoiled being from the New York area with MCs like KRS-One and Rakim and Big Daddy Kane and the whole slew of them, where it just went, and we could probably go, say every verse of their line and understand it for most of them.
I would say we were spoiled, because lyricism was a big thing back then. Even to some of the music now, the lyrics, they do have substance to it, or what we picked up on back then.
Right.
They pick up on what's being said now. You might not understand it. They might be mumbling, but you ask somebody that's 18 to 25, they can tell you line for line and sing line for line what's going on. You're like, I don't know what he's saying, but they know exactly what they're saying. It might not make sense to you, but we were spoiled because lyrically, you had to be an MC in order to make it. It wasn't saturated. You had to stand out. You had to prove yourself. You know what I'm saying? Lyrically, style-wise, everything, even to get a record out there. Now you can put something out from your bedroom. That's why it's so saturated. You know, but I'm not necessarily encouraging those who are stuck in a era. That's what you love. That's what I love. That's what I came up on. But in order to keep it, keep progressing in this thing, you got to sit back and try to understand what they're doing.
Right.
But everything goes in circles. Everything goes 360. So a lot of that stuff is starting to turn around. Some of these younger kids are getting into being way more lyrical and having substance in their raps as well.
Nice.
But you have to be hip and know who's doing what may not be for you. But don't think that they all just on the same thing, because some of them are actual students of the game.
Right.
Some of these younger kids, like some of them impress me when I would think that they don't know nothing. I play something from the 70s, like, oh, I know such and such. My mother plays that. I'm like, okay. Or they came up on Mobb Deep and Nas and Jay and Big and all of that. They listened to it because their older brother or something was playing it. So that influenced them, but because they're in their demographic, they do what they do, but they incorporate some of that within it. And I can tell those that have that foundation or have that, that's actual studying the where it came from.
Right.
Actually letting that, so intertwine what they're doing. You know what I mean? So it is what it is, but I'm not trying to be some fossils that you find right there. I'm still here. I'm still kicking, so I gotta keep pushing.
I hear you, bro. So we were talking offline, and we're staying on this MC thing for a bit. We were talking offline, and you stated you were MC for a little bit. Did anything happen with that, or you just kind of
I had a couple things come out, but there was nothing that big. I was I had a group back then. We did a few records. We had a couple things come out, but nothing really that popped off like that. But I was an MC. I was all right. I used to do my thing.
You ain't gonna put yourself down like, I was no good, so I gave it up.
I had some skill. I was nice with it.
So now back to your producing stuff. As a producer, we're talking about the lyrics. Do you guys actually, or do some of you actually help some of these artists with lyrics?
Sometimes, but that would basically be writing as well. Now, right? So sometimes as a producer, you might not have written the record or had anything to do with writing the record, whether it be hip hop or R&B or whatever genre it's in, but you know how to get the best out of what they're doing. So, song wise, you say, okay, they might sing it this way. You know what? It might be better if you go up with this note because it'll give more feeling. But
direction.
Direction. As putting together the project or putting together the song on the record. But myself as well as my partner, when we do records or the artists that we're working with, some of them, we actually help write the records as well. Which actually adds substance to it. So it might be interpreted as production, but it's really more on the writer's side. But it also helps to make the record into something bigger. Like we're able to understand, older records, what they do, what the vibe that it gave, and maybe incorporate that in what's happening now. Like, say, for instance, when we worked on an R&B record, the artist came up with, R&B wise, we might have the beat. They might not have any words to it, but they just start bobbing, like humming, like certain melodies, and we'll go through the melodies. Be like, okay, you know what? That'll work for the verse right here, or maybe the first 4 lines of the verse. This might be the pre-hook. It might sound like the bridge, and it might not be any words, but just certain melodies that's happening. And then from there, we will sit down, or we'll go through it and be like, come up with words. What the song concept is, that kind of thing, and just start building it that way, or for the melodies. So
Right.
we do intertwine with the writing as well.
Nice. So the length of the records has changed dramatically. Back in the
Absolutely.
70s, 80s, you could hear a 30-minute song and you know
Exactly.
what the end sounds like.
Yep.
Nowadays, with
Attention span.
with I caught wind a couple of years of this quick mixing where they're only playing like 60 or 90 minutes of a song, and I thought it was
90
just
seconds.
yeah, I thought it was crazy to
Yeah.
cut off a song like right before the lyrics start and they start to sing, and now you're on two different songs after
Right.
that.
I think
So go
I'm
ahead.
not exactly sure where that started at, but I think it
Mhm.
had a lot to do with the area. Like certain cities, like a DJ might play a record and he's trying to get the energy going in the crowd. So in order to keep that energy up, you play some, they get hyped. Everybody gets amped up. Oh, it's lit, that's fire. And because they're building that energy up, they flip to the next, and the crowd goes crazy. And certain areas, that was big for them. With us,
Right.
we actually want to hear the record kind of thing. So it sort of, I don't know how it happened. I think it was certain areas that were doing, certain DJs was doing that. And sort
Right.
of, being that everything is so accessible, internet, everything sort of, started intermingling and DJing styles became different. But as for the length of songs, I think me personally, I think it got to do with attention span. When we were younger, and I'm not knocking the youth or whatever, but everything is so accessible. You can click here, there's 900 channels, 1,000 channels, as opposed to when we were coming up, we only had like 2 or 3 or 4 channels. You know what I'm saying? Flip to VHF or UHF, you might catch some
For
lines
real.
going on, something like that. But we basically had to pay attention to what was going on. So our attention span was a lot longer. Records were like 12 minutes, 13 minutes back then. Now records are 2 minutes.
And that's too long for some people.
Yeah, exactly. They play like you said, 90 seconds, 45 seconds of the record, and then you on to the next.
Can
what I
can
mean?
you imagine?
Even the length of the verses are shorter. Back then you had 60. Basically, the standard was like a 16-bar verse, 8-bar hook.
Just
Now
about to say that.
Now there's songs with 8 bars. That's the standard 8-bar verse.
Yeah.
Maybe an 8-bar hook, sometimes a 4-bar hook, 8-bar verse, a little outro, and they out of here. 2 minutes, boom, and it's done.
Can you imagine Crash Crew High Power Rap being a 3-minute song?
I can't imagine. I can't imagine.
Because one of the dopest rhymes to me was at the end. You walking down the street with your box in your hand.
Right.
Everybody knew it to the end.
Exactly. But I mean, it's a different generation. It's a different generation.
Wow.
The attention span everything is so accessible. So they can get to whatever's going to keep their attention for that moment. Then they go on to the next. That's why these songs are so short. They just want to get, and that also plays into the mumble rap thing, or their songs as well, because it's about a vibe for them. For us, it was about the lyrics, about the feel of the beat, the feel of the whole song, the way it moved. So you paying attention to what's being said.
Yeah,
that's why the songs were longer. Now they're just going off of that vibe, so they vibe with that, and then another record might come on that kind of has that vibe, so it blends right in for them, and they on that vibe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's different, but
crazy.
You gotta understand. You gotta keep up. If you obviously there's still a market for our 90s 2000 hip hop. Like there's some young cats now. I'm not sure if you heard of them. Griselda.
No.
These cats from Buffalo. Right, they're big right now, but their music sounds like the 90s. They actually do records with all of the 90s artists, from Wu to Premier does beats for them to Pete Rock and everything. But
wow,
when you hear them, even though their stuff is new, like Benny the Butcher, Conway the Machine, that's all part of Griselda. Their music sounds like the 90s. And there's a lot of cats that were doing like 90s era hip hop, unless they had a following or whatever, it would sound dated. But for some reason, the way they do it, I don't know what their formula is, but the way they do it, even though it's now, it sounds like the 90s, but it doesn't sound dated.
Right.
So there is still a turnaround. There's still a place for our music. That's not going to go away. And like I said, everything goes 360.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, yeah.
And bro, thank you for this education on like the producing thing, because I know I didn't know all the things that you're involved in. I didn't know the difference between being a producer and a beat maker. I thought it was just all intertwined.
Yeah.
So this has been a learning for me. You know, type in the chat if you're listening right now, even people from the replay, if you didn't know what a producer did, you know now.
Right. You know, there's that argument about with Dick. Everybody knows Hitman did a lot of records, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of actual beats. They might be doing some of the production, but Diddy gets the production credit on it. He might come in there and say, yo, add a cymbal right here, or add a sound effect right here, or this need to turn up, or whatever. But that is production. He might not be the work person that's creating the music, but because he has an ear for it as to what it should sound like, that's actually producing as well. So he might not be necessarily making a beat, might be D-Dot, making a beat, but when they're actually putting the song together, putting the record together, he's in there saying, yo, maybe say it that way. Use that verse. Say it with a little bit more energy. That need a crash right there. It need a hi-hat here. You know what I mean? And that's all part of production. So you might say, and with Diddy, he might do that. Dre actually makes beats as well, but he has other, producers around it. Dre's an entity. Dre can actually make a beat, but he has other producers adding on to what he's doing as well. But he also knows, I want this out of this artist. So he knows to say, yo, you need to rap it like that. Or if you've heard different artists say that when they work with Dre, he wants them to enunciate everything.
Right.
Like when he worked with T.I., he had his Atlanta slang, his dialect or whatever. And you be slurring certain words. And he's like, no, you need to say that clearly. You need to enunciate that word. And artists have spoke on that working with Dre. So Dre's a producer because he knows how to put the record together.
Right.
He's also a beat maker. So, production, being a producer, it entails a lot of different things. But producing the record actually has to do with making the record sound like as best as possible. Bringing the best out of that artist, bringing the best out of that piece of work.
That you just reminded me of another term that I hear is arranger, arranged by so and so. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Nowadays, that's arranging is part of production, but back then they were arrangers as well. So what an arranger would do is he would, like, say back in the 70s when they had a live band. Okay, this horn section they're gonna play this at this point right here. Okay, we're gonna have a crescendo on the cymbals or whatever. It's gonna rise this way, and he'd arrange musically what everybody's doing. And the producer might be in there as well, saying, okay, the vocalist, you got to bring this out. You got to sing it this way. You need more feel on the drums. You need to, smack that bass a little harder. But
right.
The arrangement of music, the arrangement is different. And nowadays, arrangement has to do with putting the music together as well. Like say a verse, like what I was talking about when we, might hum certain melodies with the artist and be like, okay, this right here sounds like the bridge. This sounds like the pre-hook. This sounds like the verse. That's arranging as well. Right. So, it's all subject to interpretation. But it's changed over time, but certain things are still core. It's always going to be there when it comes to production.
Sweet. What category would you put RZA in?
RZA? He's a producer. He's a producer.
not super or
You mean category? Oh, RZA? Oh yeah, RZA's one of my favorite producers as well, because he was outside of the box.
yeah.
Samples will be a little bit off time, but it goes to being able to give that live feel, like I talked about, as opposed to that metronome, that drum machine, or that that DAW program that you're using, having every just thing dead on. RZA, he would sort of bring that feel into the music, sometimes on purpose, sometimes not. But as long as it sounded good to the ear, there's no rules to this. If it sounds good to you, sounds good to everybody else, that's what counts. So when you hear a RZA beat, you might hear a sample coming in, it sounds off, but it still gives you a certain feeling.
Yeah.
Right? Other producers, like say Pete Rock, his stuff is dead on time, but it still has that feel.
Yep.
His style is totally different from RZA. But it's all about what you do with it creatively.
Man.
Yes, RZA's one of my favorite. You know, he went against the grain. Where he did
Big time. Big time. Yeah. What category would you put Jay Dilla?
Jay Dilla. I think Jay Dilla.
You even know how to explain that, because some of the stuff I watch a couple of his things now, and it's like, what?
Yeah, he was incredible. You ever heard Donuts? That Donuts project that he put out?
I think that's one of the things that I was listening to.
Yeah, he did that while he was in a hospital.
Yeah, wow.
Before he passed, and he had his, his drum machine in. He was set up in there. He was making everything. But Dilla was the truth. Dilla was definitely the truth. The way he caught loops, he heard it differently from a lot of different people.
Yeah,
he would put it together a totally different way. I mean, that's why Q-Tip and Tribe and everybody else started messing with him, because they heard the skill that he had.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Dilla is definitely one of my favorites.
Wow.
Definitely one of my favorites.
So what are you guys doing, and what's going on for the future?
Well, I know this gentleman back here, Buddha.
Yes, that's the super producer Buddha.
Absolutely. Yeah, we partnered up. We partnered up, and we formed a production company called Goodfellas. So we got some things on the way, and we're working with different artists. Right now, we're working with an artist called Snacko, a young artist, but because we have, the knowledge in the game, as long as we've been doing this, we're able to incorporate what we know with his younger energy.
Right.
And so far, the response has been great. We're still putting the project together, but different labels, execs have heard the songs and like, yo, y'all got something in. So that's one of the artists that we're working with.
Okay.
But but we got some big things on the rise. Definitely got some big things on the rise in different genres as well, not just hip hop, R&B, you name it. Because of our background, we're able to do, whatever's needed, whatever type of music is needed, whatever feels good. And with Snacko, we weren't keeping him in a box as well. We sort of expanded his palette. So he's doing different types of genres, everything from rock to Afro beats to straight hip hop to, R&B sound and stuff. He's multifaceted as an artist. And that has a lot to do with production, how we produce the record.
Right. So as a producer, and then we're going to start wrapping this thing up, but as a producer, do you guys kind of run in trends, or does one of you producers create something and everybody wants to create something similar to what that is?
Yeah, that happens a lot with producers. They might have a certain sound and that record blows up, and then everybody's coming at them for that particular sound. Mm-hmm. We got to go against that. You know what I mean? Plus, we're musically we're multifaceted, so I tend not to stick in the lane of what's going on now. obviously, I know it still has to be palatable and, and be accepted by the listeners, whether they be younger or older. So I know certain things are going to have to sound a certain way for them. But I might do what they're doing, but put my spin on it. Or we will do the same thing, like when we're working together. Sometimes Buddha will start a beat, he would start something, and he give it to me, and I'll finish it off. I'll start something, and he'll finish it off, kind of thing. Or sometimes we put the piece together while we're working together. And, it comes together that way. There's no rules to it. But I tend to not do that because it seems like your life or in the game, production-wise, is short-lived when you do that sound because everybody's on to the next.
Right.
After a period of time. But if you're able to, like I said, evolve with what's going on, but use your knowledge that you've gained through doing this for how many ever years and incorporate that in it, it's generational and it's not going to go nowhere. We're trying to make timeless music. We're trying to make records that you're playing 10 years from now, as opposed to something that you're going to play for 3 months or 6 months and then it's out of here. You forget about that record.
Right. Or a month with some of the newer songs that, is hot for a weekend and then nobody ever plays it again.
Yep.
Which
happens
happens
a lot right now. My fault.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you got it.
Oh, which brings me to a question.
Mm-hmm.
As a producer, do you know your beat, your production is going to be a hit? I was watching a documentary on ABBA.
Yeah.
And the song Dancing Queen, they said, we knew this was going to be a hit. They were 2 years in the making of this song. And they was like, we knew this was going to be a hit. Do you guys feel that, like Buddha behind you, do you know if that song, when it comes out, it's going to be played 20 years later as if people is hearing it for the first time? That's still everybody's reaction.
That's a good question. I mean, sometimes you can feel that. Some things are undeniable. You can feel it. But there's sometimes where we make something or I make something and I put my all in it. I'm like, yo, this is crazy. I know what I did to make it and it sounds crazy. And they be like, yeah, I like it. That's cool. Let me hear this other joint. And you play something else that you did like this. Like, yo, that's the joint right there. It's weird the way it works. So sometimes you might have that feeling and you know that there's undeniable. There's other times you don't have a clue as to what's going to take off. You know what I mean? It's all subjective. It's no real rules to it. But there are times when you make something you like, there's no denying this one. This one is going to do what it's going to do. And other times you don't have a clue and it just goes like that.
Right.
Yeah, so there's no real straight answer. You know what I mean?
Oh man. But bro, I want to thank you for your time. Do you have any shout outs that you want to give before we wind this thing down?
Oh, absolutely. Well, obviously, I want to give a shout out to Buddha, my partner, and you as well. I would say Bolo, the producer. Matter of fact, we got to try to get him on here.
Okay.
I worked with him as well. He's a diamond producer. He's done a lot of young, some of the younger stuff as well as a little bit in the 2000s as well. He actually did that Whip and Nene record with Salento, which is done about 12 million.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But he's worked with
I don't know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, well, believe me.
See that look in my eye like.
Yeah, I know, but if you Google it, you'll see. The thing is like over 11 million, 12 million.
Wow.
So, kind of thing. But, he's older. He's like younger than me, but he's not a young dude. He's in his early 40s. But he kind of did the same thing, like was able to understand the young energy and incorporate it that way. But he's been doing it for decades as well. He's a couple decades. He's worked with T-Pain. He's worked with a bunch of artists as well. You know what I mean? So
Wow.
yeah, but we need to get him on there because he has a lot of knowledge.
Yes.
He definitely has.
We'll set
Yeah.
that up offline, definitely.
Yeah. These artists definitely need direction.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these, you know, they might have something with them, and you're able to see that in them. But because we got the knowledge we have, and we've been doing it so long, we're able to direct them and expand them and make them bigger, as opposed to just that microwave thing that's gonna be out of here. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir. So, how many more? Well, let me ask this this question, this last question.
Okay.
What is the goal of a producer when you're making a song? Are you just doing it for the art? Are you doing it so people can hear this 100 years from now, 20 years from now? What is your each of you personal goal?
I mean, for me, I want it to be timeless. I want it to be something that's played when I'm gone. I want it to be something that our kids can actually monetize off of when we're not here anymore. I want it to be undeniable, and that's what we're going for every time. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily mean that every record you do is going to do that, but that's basically the intention. That's what you're putting into it creatively. Obviously, the business of music and actual creating the music is something totally different.
Totally.
The music is there. The business is a whole different animal. You know what I mean? But that's always my intention. That's always Buddha's intention. That's our intention when we're doing music, you know, to make it timeless. And that's what we're striving for, even with these younger artists. We're taking them out, you know, the ones we work with, we take them out that box. And we try to expand them and let them see things differently. We actually have them doing homework, like go find out who this is. Just the other day, we had our artists Googling Sade. When we heard him, in my mind, I was like, he sounds like a male Sade. Not necessarily tone-wise.
Right.
Doing
the smoothness.
Melodically, yeah. I'm like, yo, you need to go Google Sade and figure out who that was. And he came back, he's like, I see what you're talking about. I hear it. So, you know, we're there to pass the knowledge on. We're there to help them learn, to expand and become, you know, big at what they do so that they can pass the knowledge on later on.
Oh,
you know
that's dope, bro. Yeah, that is so dope, man. But Jay, the pro or the pro, I appreciate your time here.
Appreciate you. Absolutely.
You know, just giving your knowledge and telling your producer story and you know, all 3 billion people that's on Facebook, they'll hear this eventually. On YouTube, they'll hear it. On Twitch, they'll hear it. On Twitter, they'll hear it.
Good to me, man. I appreciate the platform. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing for the culture.
Oh man, thank you.
It's big. It's big and it's needed. It's necessary.
Yeah. I'm doing this because DJs don't get the recognition that they used to get.
Yeah, you're right about that. And DJs are the ones that make these records go anyway. We can create it, but unless y'all playing it,
but unless people are playing it, and people got to realize that when they're, you know, wanting to undercut a DJ or, you know, don't give them their props, or should I say, in modern times, their flowers.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And DJs deserve their flowers because don't nothing go in this industry without the DJs. I don't care. Sure. Even the streaming, even the platforms, it's online, all of that. The DJs make the records go, whether it's in the club, whether it's the strip club, whether it's radio, the DJs make the records go. They're all the ones that bring it to the listeners, bring it to the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I respect the DJ, always had. I mean, this hip hop thing started with the DJ.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The MC at one time, it was the one that was, you know, the bathrooms over here, so and so in the gray car left lights on. That was the MC.
Exactly.
Back in the day. No disrespect to them,
Not at
but
all. Not at all.
that was them back in the day, and the DJ was it.
Yeah, they were there. They were there to promote the DJ, get the crowd hype while the DJ was doing what he was doing. The big DJ up.
Yeah.
That's how it started.
I thank you again, my brother.
I thank you, man.
How do people get in contact with you?
They can get at me on IG, Jada Pro. Simple as that. Just like on the screen, all in one. And man, you get at me on Facebook. You know, same thing. I'm here. I'm willing to pass the knowledge on. Willing to work with you. You know what I mean? We willing to work with you if you trying to do this for real.
Yeah,
we got the fire.
Definitely. There are some people out there that's looking to do it seriously, and just reach out if you're one of them people.
Mm-hmm.
This is Harry the Big Dog, and I had the pleasure of interviewing with Jada Pro. I can tag that super producer onto your name too.
I mean, if you feel like that, please put it on there.
Because you guys are doing things now. You did big things back then, and you're going to be doing bigger things in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's one thing I want to
say. Go ahead. I think we lost you. Okay, you're back. Yeah.
I was just saying to the older producers out there that still want to do this, don't ever feel like you're too old for this. Don't ever feel like that. You know what I mean? The knowledge that you have, the time that you've been doing it, the music knowledge you have, your time on this planet can only help you moving forward. So if you got that love for it and you believe in yourself, keep pushing.
Roger that. So again, this is Harry the Big Dog. This is the DJ interview, and we will see you